I was born with a choir inside, pots clanging, live oaks breathing, kids clapping off beat under flickering lights. For 40 years, St. Bartholomew was my home. I tuned pianos, taught altos to trust their ears, kept keys to the choir closet and to the parsonage next door. Then one humid Sunday, season of change meant my name vanished from a pew. My job moved to emeritus, and my keys were due by Friday. They said transition. It felt like eviction. My daughter-in-law, our church's camera-ready brand voice, smiled for a moment that wasn't a photo and offered help I didn't need. I packed slow. The quilt Aunt Bertie stitched, Leon's tie clip, and the lemon tree on the porch that never asked permission to bloom. I moved into a tired little house and scrubbed, painted, and listened. Work and grief shared my table and didn't argue. Then I found it. Leon's old folder, the parcel behind the church, the reversion clause, my signature. If the land stopped feeding and singing for a year, title snapped back to me. The fellowship hall and the parsonage sat on it. While the church chased excellence, the kitchen went quiet. When the bank called and the roof leaked, they came to my gate. We need your blessing. I didn't bring revenge. I brought a bargain. 2 free meals a week, 1 open music night, no cameras, honest budgets, and $1 a year lease through a new Ellis fund. We signed, and the first night back, the line wrapped the block. That's when the choir inside me, my real choir, answered. The morning I learned my name no longer belonged where I had left it, the humidity had settled low and wet and sticky, and the sky was the color of dishwater. I wore my pale green dress, the one that behaved in the breeze. I set Glory's water down by the back steps. Glory is my rescue dog, half shepherd, half question mark, all heart. And I tied a scarf around my hair. The choir was supposed to rehearse early. The anniversary service was next Sunday, and I'd promised our altos they'd be strong enough to carry the ending of Total Praise without leaning on the sopranos. I walked past the parsonage camellias Leon had planted back when his knees still let him kneel, and I stepped into the church. I noticed the empty spot before I noticed the people. The plaque on the pew end, Ellis family in memory of Deacon Leon, was gone. It used to catch the light in the mornings. Now there was a pale rectangle on the wood as if the metal had been pressed there by a warm hand and then snatched away. My stomach did that slow twisting it does when something small tells you something big. "Good morning, Sister Margaret," says Sister Nadine from the vestibule. Cheerful voice, eyes that wouldn't settle on mine. "Morning," I said. "Y'all moved the plaque for polishing? It's missing." She fussed with her envelope box. "Talk to Castor about any changes." Changes. The word landed like a dropped hymn book. From the sanctuary, a bright voice floated out, mic'd and rehearsed. "Family, we are moving into a new season. God is doing a new thing." I knew that voice. Everybody in Charleston Facebook groups knew that voice. Renee. My daughter-in-law is an expert in shining. I don't mean she's a bad woman. I mean she knows where light shines and how to stand under it. She's beautiful in the way that makes men elbow each other and women sit up straighter. She keeps a social media page where she films herself in soft lighting, asking questions like, "What is the brand God gave you?" She's married to my son, Isaiah, who used to bring me dog-eared library books and ask me why the sea smells like iron and salt. He's an accountant now, with neat cuffs and a jaw he clenches when he lies. What he lies about depends on the day. I eased into the back pew. The choir was already on the risers. Most of them wouldn't meet my eyes. Some were new. There was a young man with cords on his hoodie and a girl with hair like water. I heard good tone on the altos. Whoever arranged them knew what they were doing. I folded my hands and felt a small burn of anger move along my arms like heat creeping under a pot. The announcement part of service is where everything really happens, and Renee walked through it like she always walks through a camera frame. She said, "I'm thrilled to share that St. Bartholomew is embracing a strategic vision to reach the next generation. That means fresh leadership and fresh spaces. It also means we're making hard, holy decisions. We honor what got us here, we bless who got us here, and we move forward." Pastor Jerome stood behind her with a smile that never quite made it to his eyes. He's a good preacher and a weak man. Those two facts can live in the same chest. Would Sister Margaret please stand? And there it was. The way people suck in breath when they know a car is about to hit another car, but the brakes haven't screamed yet. I stood. My knees sounded like doors in a storm. 40 years, Pastor said. We love you, we honor you, and we see you. But in the spirit of transition, the board has unanimously decided to appoint a new choir director for this next season. We want to celebrate Sister Margaret as she moves into an emeritus role. Also, per our 2023 housing policy, parsonage occupancy is tied to active ministry assignments. We're asking for a smooth transition out of the parsonage within 14 days.
Smooth. As if I were a wrinkle they could iron. I did not cry. When people try to take your dignity, the first thing they look for is a tear. I looked at my son. He was at the front row on the right, hand on his thigh, thumb pressing hard into fabric. He didn't look back. I breathed in and caught the lemon oil somebody had rubbed into the pulpit. I said, "Thank you for letting me know." And I sat down. After the benediction, people surrounded me the way people surround a casket. Hugs, smiles half made, words half formed. You know how churches go through seasons. Sometimes God closes a door to open a window. You can come stay with me if you need. I nodded and thanked and loosened people from around me like a shawl that had slipped too low. Renee approached with that gleam in her. She hugged me in the way that says, "This is a photo," even when there's no camera. "We'll help you pack. Change is hard for older saints, but we want you to feel cherished in this new chapter." "Older saints still have two good hands," I said. She laughed like we were girlfriends buying candles. "We're also making some aesthetic updates in the sanctuary, fresh paint, lighting, a rebrand for our live stream. I'd love your blessing." "Blessings come from God," I said. "Approval comes from people. You have God's, I hope. My approval you don't need." Her smile didn't crack. It slid a millimeter and then froze again. Miss Claudine found my elbow. She is my neighbor and somebody's cousin, and the kind of woman who makes even a plastic chair feel like a throne. "Let me drive you home," she said. "I don't want you walking." "I live next door," I said. She didn't correct me. I suppose we both heard the past tense hanging there. When we reached the parsonage, a man was already on my step with a clipboard. He wore a shirt with the church's name stitched on the chest and new boots. He looked like someone who used to work maintenance and got promoted to operations because he learned Excel. He said, "We're doing a walkthrough Tuesday to assess wear and tear." "Wear and tear," I repeated. "There's a lemon tree on the side porch. If anyone harms it, I'll know." He didn't write that down. I called my son that afternoon. He didn't pick up. I called again. On the third ring, he answered. His voice had the tone men use when they think massaging facts makes them true. "Mama, I was going to call you. Pastor asked me to give you a heads up, but it got busy with the numbers. We're restructuring. This is not about you. It's about the mission." "Whose mission?" I said. "The church's or your wife's?" "Mama," he said lowered, warning. "You were a boy with a book once. I'd read to you on this porch. When did you decide money had better words than I do?" He was quiet. I don't like to hurt. I've learned sometimes you have to cut a rot to save a tree. "We'll talk Tuesday," he said. "I'll come to the walkthrough." "You'll come as what?" I asked. "My son or the board's accountant?" The line hummed. He said, "Both," and hung up. People think packing is about boxes. Packing is about choosing which versions of your life you want to carry and which you can let become stories. I moved slowly. I wrapped plates and old choir programs and put my dresses into the suitcases I'd kept since Leon and I took a bus to Beaufort and spent 2 nights in a small inn by the river because he'd saved all year. I took the framed photo of us where his hand is on my shoulder and we look like we both heard the same joke. I took the quilt my Aunt Bertie had stitched with shades of brown that carry more warmth than a heater. I left any vase someone gave me because they thought I liked vases. I left the plastic bins full of borrowed cookbooks for the next woman who thinks she can cook from a recipe and only later learns recipes are just letters. On Tuesday, the operations man walked through my rooms with his clipboard. Isaiah came to stand in the hallway with his mouth small and flat. Renee clicked in on shoes that had never met a puddle. She ran a finger along my mantle and looked at the dust as if it insulted her. "We're going to stage this space so beautifully," she said to herself, the way you talk to a mirror that talks back.
In the kitchen, the operations man wrote, "Replace range hood" and "update backsplash," like the stove was a person that had failed some evaluation. He took a photo of the lemon tree and then a photo of my knees when I moved to stand in front of it. I didn't mean to block anything. Sometimes the body does the work before the mind says the words. "I'll be out by Friday," I told him. "You can step out of my kitchen now." Renee looked to Isaiah. He nodded without looking at me. They left. The porch screen door sighed and the house exhaled too. Houses watch us, you know. They hold our fights in their drywall and our laughter in their plaster. If you've ever been in a room and felt it smile at you, you know what I mean. I didn't tell anyone that when I left, I wasn't leaving to nowhere. There was a house in my name. It wasn't much. My Aunt Bertie had left it to me when she passed. It sat in North Charleston on a short street that dead ends into a chain-link fence and a view of the rail yard. White paint flaking like sunburn, 2 steps out front that slanted left, a roof that gave up the middle, a city sticker on the door warning about violations, and a notice to fix the gutters or face fines. The first time I saw it after the letter from the lawyer, I had walked through the weeds and put my palm on the door and said, "I'll come back when I'm brave." Friday came. Glory leaped into the passenger seat of my old Buick with her tail beating time, and we rolled down Meeting Street with everything I owned wedged between the suitcases and the lemon tree in its blue pot strapped in the back like a child. Miss Claudine followed me in her sedan all the way. She pulled into the dirt patch that someone once intended to be a driveway. She turned off her engine and sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes on me, like she was handing me a light she had been carrying in her chest. "She called me if a nail looks at you wrong," she said. "I will," I said. She got out, hugged me, kissed Glory on the crown, climbed back into her car, and left me there with the heat glimmering above the road and a house that expected me to either run or start. Sometimes the first brave act is to unlock a door you already own. The lock fought me. I spoke to it. "I'll get you oiled, sweetheart," I said, like it was a hymn we could sing together. The door swung inward, slow and grumpy. Inside, the air smelt like old rainwater and dust. There was a fan in the ceiling that had stopped spinning in the Clinton administration. The sink leaned away from the wall, ashamed. A roach scuttled like a hand you didn't invite. I set my bags down and felt something settle in my bones that had been restless for months. Sometimes bad news removes a heavy thing from your hands, and you don't notice how light you feel until your feet move like music. I went to Brooks Hardware because everyone goes to Brooks Hardware when a house looks at you like this. It's a place where nails stand like soldiers in little boxes, and men who know wood can tell you a story by looking at a joist's face. The bell on the door was polite. The air tasted like lumber and coffee. The man behind the counter had the kind of beard that decides whether to go gray or not, and decides maybe later. He looked like someone with a project and a prayer, he said. "Which one's on sale?" I said. He laughed. "Name's Calvin. What's yours?" I said, "Margaret, I need primer, brushes, traps for anything that lives where I don't want it living, and hands I can afford." He studied my face in the way men do when they decide whether to call you ma'am or sister. He chose both at once. "I'll put together what you need. For hands, I know a young man who's learning and doesn't overcharge. He's honest and he listens. Sometimes that's worth more than skill." "Listening's half the work," I said. He wrote a number on a card. "His name is Terrence." Glory lay at my feet, belly on cool tile. Calvin leaned down and rubbed her neck. "You a good girl," he told her. "You belong to a woman who's about to make something beautiful out of something tired." "Don't jinx it," I said. He shook his head. "No such thing. Material wants to become what it's meant to be. People too." I loaded primer and bleach and hope into my trunk.
Terrence came that afternoon wearing a shirt with paint on it in places that said he was messy with enthusiasm and careful with edges. He said, "Yes, ma'am," the way boys in this city do, with respect that doesn't try to buy anything from you. We pulled up old carpet that had trapped somebody else's bad air. We scrubbed walls until my shoulders cut me with pain like a sharp friend telling the truth. I set a pot on an old burner and heated water with lemon slices to make the room smell like a small morning. When the sun went down, I sat on the front step with Glory, and I watched the sky burn out its orange and shrug into blue. A neighbor kid rode his bike past my fence with a card clothespin to his spoke so it made that broken engine sound. He slowed just enough to look. "You moving in here?" he asked, suspicion wrapped in politeness. "I am," I said. "What's your name?" "Tay," he said. "My grandma lives over there with the purple roses." "I'm Margaret," I said. "Next time you ride by, bring me a review of the best corner store snack within walking distance." He smiled like a boy who knows a woman just told him he matters and didn't make a show of it. "Spicy fries at the Exxon on Dorchester," he said, "but you gotta ask for the fresh ones. They keep the good ones in back for the regulars." "Then I guess I better become a regular," I said. That first night, I slept on the floor on the quilt Aunt Bertie made, fans dragging hot air in lazy circles, Glory's body like a question mark pressed into my legs. I woke twice from dreams where somebody called my name and I couldn't figure out where the voice came from. Each time I held my own wrist like I was checking for a pulse and whispered, "I'm here." I will tell you something I learned that month. Work and grief are cousins who don't argue. When one sits at your table and takes too much bread, you can stand up, open a window, and start painting, and both of them will know to make room. I painted the living room in a color called oyster because a woman at the paint counter said, "If you ever tasted the river on your tongue, that's this." The kitchen I painted in a white that wasn't surgical. We patched a ceiling where a drip had lied for years. We pulled weeds until my hands smelt like green and soil and the old, honest sweat that good work calls out of a person. I found a scrap of chalk and drew a simple pair of wings out back. Not angel wings, like in malls. Wings like a pelican, solid and unfancy. When Tay came by, he stood in front of them, spread his arms and said, "I look like I could go somewhere." "You can, you better." Days peeled off the calendar. I stopped checking my phone to see whether my son had texted. When I did look, I saw church announcements about fresh vision and opportunities to sow into the new season and pictures of Renee with her smile turned just so, the way people do when they want an algorithm to bless them. I turned my phone face down, like a woman closing a book she already knows the ending of. In the second week, I found the box Leon had labeled in his handwriting tight and tidy as his temper. It held legal papers wrapped in a plastic bag and tucked into a folder the color of old mustard. I had forgotten how careful he had been. When we were young, he could tell you the date of any holiday 10 years out, and he always saved receipts in envelopes someone probably threw away after he died because they didn't know that kind of order is part of a person's love. I spread the papers out on the floor. There was the original deed to a slice of land adjoining the church, purchased by the community and then conveyed to Leon's name for a reason someone had called administrative simplicity. Leon hosted free music workshops there before he died. There was a rider. I had almost forgotten. It was a reversion clause. It said in words that lie back in their letters like they were tired by the act of being written, that if the parcel stopped being used for community food or music for more than a year, the title would revert to the family estate, meaning me. The fellowship hall and the parsonage both sat partially on that parcel. I remember signing something in the 90s, a consent to use document. My name was on that too. I read it 5 times. The room was quiet in the way rooms get when they are about to tell you that the story you are in is not the story you thought it was. I didn't smile. I didn't cackle. I didn't post a screenshot to the world. I set the papers back in the folder. I breathed and said, "Leon, you tidy old man, look at you, protecting me from beyond time." I made copies.
I put the originals back in the box with other pieces of him, old programs, a tie clip, shaped like a treble clef, a napkin with a joke written on it that only makes sense if you were there that night at the fish fry when the pastor tried to steal a hush puppy and Leon slapped his hand so fast the pastor preached the next day on gluttony as if God had whispered it to him. I slid the box under my bed. I slept easier with the sound of paper holding its own weight beneath me.
Painting turned into something else. After the living room dried and the kitchen started to feel like a place where food might be cooked in more than a Dutch oven, I took 2 half-empty talons and went out to the cinder block wall that ran along the alley. I drew a line, then another, then a shape that could have been a window looking into a better day. Before I knew it, light was coming through a painted window, and anybody who looked at that wall would see a table and 2 cups and steam rising from them like the morning many of us think we don't deserve. Tay brought his grandmother to see it. "That's about the sweetest thing I've seen on concrete," she said. "You need to sign that." "I'm not a real artist," I said. "You got paint on your hands and something on the wall," she said. "What else a real artist got that you don't?" The mural traveled faster than my name. A woman who runs a little city newsletter took a picture and wrote a piece titled "Mornings on a Wall in North Charleston." They said my name in it, not my age, not my job, my name. It made more difference than you might expect. One afternoon, while I was scrubbing a pan that belonged to a kitchen before mine, a white SUV I recognized from 100 pictures turned onto my street and hesitated like it didn't know neighborhoods without gates had right of way. Renee stepped out wearing sneakers as if she had thought about whether heels on this block would make someone snicker. She stood at my gate. She didn't open it. Already progress. "Renee, we need your help," she said. "You should have thought of that before you taught a congregation to clap on command," I said, because sometimes pettiness is how truth stretches. She inhaled and let it out the way a woman does when she pretends she's counting 3. "This isn't about me," she said. "The church, we're in a bind. Isn't that what tithes are for? Unbinding?" I wiped my hands on a towel. It was one of those leftover towels that feel like large, disappointed napkins. She swallowed. "We stepped out in faith on a renovation loan for the sanctuary and the parsonage. Construction costs grew. We started the new live stream brand. We hired a consultant. We planned a young adults lounge. Then the bank called the note faster than we anticipated because rates went up and..." She paused, like she was considering whether to lie to me, and decided lying costs more than truth when you have to pay interest later. "And a vendor our committee used billed twice for the lighting truss. The auditor flagged it. It's not a scandal. It's messy." "Messy is when a toddler eats spaghetti. This sounds like something else." "We need to refinance," she said. "The bank wants a clean title, but there's a reversion clause on the back parcel. The fellowship hall sits on it. The parsonage too. The bank says the title isn't insurable for the refinance unless the clause is released or satisfied. Pastor says you hold the power to fix this with a signature." I leaned my shoulder on the door jamb. Glory came and put her head through the space between Renee's hand and her body as if to say, "Woman, you smell like uncertainty." I said, "You had Pastor tell me to give my keys back. Now you need mine." I want to apologize. And for once, the light in her wasn't a camera. I wanted to change everything because I thought everything needed me. I didn't know better. I thought age means dead air. I know better today than I knew last month. I don't know enough for tomorrow, but I know we'll lose our church if you don't sign. "Your church," I said, not a question. "Ours," she said quickly. "Ours, yours, ours, mine, his, God's." "Where's Isaiah?" I asked. "At the office. He's trying to fix numbers. They look like a lie, but they're not." "I need to see Pastor," I said, "in person, in the fellowship hall, not in the smaller room, in the big one, tonight." "That's not possible," she said automatically. "Then the bank can wait," I said, and I didn't have to say the rest. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Pastor Jerome's voice had the tone of a man who decided to buy humility from the bulk aisle. "Come at 7, he said. The fellowship hall is a rectangle with walls painted the color churches choose when they don't want to argue about paint. It's where babies get blessed with sheet cakes and where casseroles stay warm while people tell old stories. I walked in at 7. People were already there. Not just board members, deacons, younger folks, older saints wearing cardigans you can cry into. Pastor stood at the end of the room with the long folding table. Isaiah sat next to him, elbows square, hands steeple, like the world had told him this posture would carry him through a storm. Renee looked different, a little pale, a little less glossy. She moved like a woman who fell and didn't tell anybody until she stood and saw blood on her knee. "Thank you for coming," Pastor said. "We made mistakes." "I know," I said. He nodded. "I hurt you," he added. "You did," I said, "and you did it in front of people." Silence is a sanctified thing when it arrives with room to breathe. He let it sit. "This clause," he said, tapping papers, "we didn't know." "You should have," I said. "Leon told the previous pastor. I gave a copy to the office. But offices have closets, and closets have hungry mouths that eat what matters when nobody's watching." Isaiah looked at me then, finally. I saw my boy who once threw up on my church shoes on Easter morning because he ate jelly beans on an empty stomach and thought he could hide it. He said, "Mama, I'm sorry." "You're sorry I was hurt, or you're sorry you were part of the hurting?" I asked. His throat worked. "Both." I set my own folder on the table. "This clause says the land belongs to the church as long as it's used for music and food. Y'all stopped community nights the month I left. You closed the kitchen to volunteers who didn't pass some policy you wrote in a hurry to look important. It's been almost a year. The calendar is the one thing churches never miscount." "We were going to relaunch with excellence," Renee said softly. "Excellence doesn't mean absence," I said. "You don't get points for waiting if the hungry are outside the door." Pastor rubbed his forehead like numbers were trying to walk out of it. He said, "We need your help. We will sign whatever promises you want. We will restore what we canceled. We will open the kitchen. We'll make you whole. We'll apologize Sunday, whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," I repeated. The words felt like wet laundry, heavy, needing sun. "I won't move back," I said. "I won't take a title. I won't wear a microphone again unless I decide to sing a solo when the mood takes me. What I will do is this. We will set up a community foundation named for Leon and me. We'll call it the Ellis Fund. The fund will hold the reversion rights. The church will lease the parcel from the fund for $1 a year for 5 years. During those 5 years, the fellowship hall must host 2 free community meals a week and 1 open music night. Nobody sells a thing at those nights, no cameras, no brand, just song and food. The kitchen will welcome volunteers who pass basic safety checks, not politicking. The church will publish a budget that makes sense to a tired grandmother with a sandwich in her hand. Renee, you will remove yourself from any committee with the word finance in the title. You will not sign a vendor contract or tag a brand in our sanctuary for 1 full year. After 5 years, we revisit." Pastor blinked hard. Isaiah looked like a man remembering how to breathe. Renee closed her eyes. "And," I said, "we will stop saying season to excuse what is selfish. We will stop saying excellence when we mean expensive. We will stop saying honor to mean obedience. We will stop saying transition when we mean eviction. We will tell the truth with small words and loud hearts. And when we apologize to the congregation, it will be done in the morning, on the live stream, at the time people watch, not on a random Wednesday." "And what do you want personally?" Pastor asked. "What do you need?" "Nothing I can't buy," I said, "except sometimes dignity comes in a dish other people serve." Renee's voice wasn't bright when she spoke. It was human. She said, "I accept every condition." I nodded. "If any of this is for show, I will hold the deed in my pocket like a stone while I walk past this church without glancing at it, and I will let the land revert and the bank do what banks do. I will do that without a tremor. I will sleep fine. I will sing anyway. Do not test a woman who thought she lost everything and then learned she was enough." We signed papers that night. The notary the bank sent looked like he'd rather be watching a game. He stamped where stamps go. When we finished, Pastor asked to pray. I said okay. His prayer was simple, no adjectives, a good sign. When he put his hand on my shoulder, he didn't press, like men press when they try to push spirit into flesh. He touched and removed. I didn't stay to chat. I went home. I poured 2 fingers of sweet tea into a glass and sat on my step. Glory put her chin on my knee and looked up like she always does when she wants me to remember that love is made of attention and treats. The night was the kind where the air feels like it knows your middle name. I said out loud, for no one and for God, "I'm tired." A soft tired, the kind that comes after doing something that won't shame you tomorrow. The next Sunday, Pastor stood in the pulpit and said words like truth. He did not say season. He did not say transition. He said, "We hurt our own. We asked a mother to move out of a home we promised was hers as long as she served us, when in fact she had served us long enough.
We forgot community to chase attention. We put screens where we needed tables. People cried the way people cry when the truth shows up like a cousin you didn't invite but brings the best potato salad.
When he asked me to stand, I did. I did not smile. I let them look. I let them feel. I did not absolve them with a hand wave. It is a gift to let people carry the weight of their own learning. Then something I didn't expect happened. An older deacon, a man who once told me the choir skirts were too lively, stepped into the aisle with a brown paper bag. He walked it to me with both hands underneath like it was a baby. "Chicken," he said. "Hot." It was as if the whole church exhaled. People laughed, and then people sobbed again because laughter is always the second cousin of tears. We opened the kitchen. The first Tuesday night, the line ran down the block. People came because people always come when there's food and no questions. We served spaghetti and garlic bread and the salad someone's aunt always makes heavy on the cucumbers. Children drew with crayons on butcher paper under the tables. A woman I hadn't met sang to herself while she washed pots in water so hot the air looked like it shimmered. At the end of the night, we counted $0 and a full room, and two hands, unsteady from exhaustion, held together for a long time without words. The second Thursday, the music night, the first voice to sing belonged to Taye, who had shown up in his one good shirt and asked me if a rap counts as a song. I told him if it has breath and truth, it counts. He stood up and told us where he comes from and how his mother works a night shift and how the only thing that makes a morning quiet is drawing. When he finished, the room didn't clap. It hummed. Then it exploded. He blushed so hard his ears turned ripe apple red. In the weeks that followed, my little house became what houses become when you say "I see you" to their rooms. Terrence put in shelves that didn't lean like a tired man against a bus stop pole. Calvin stopped by on his way home most days with a bag of bolts or a stray box of screws he said had been waiting for me. He taught me how to use a miter saw with a voice that didn't sound like teaching and a stance that didn't crowd. I made him biscuits one Friday and told him he could sit on my step and eat them if he promised not to pretend he had somewhere else to be. One humid afternoon, a storm marched in, fat and serious. Rumbles turned to a flat-out battering. The church roof, like most roofs in this city, remembered when it had been made and then forgot to be sturdy. The lights went. The sanctuary flooded. Someone called me. It might have been Pastor. It might have been Sister Nadine. I only know I looked down and Glory was already waiting by the door. I grabbed my keys and went. It rained the way memories sometimes do when you open the wrong cabinet. We waded into the sanctuary, water up to our shins, everything yellowed and shivering in the lightning. I rolled up my dress and laughed. It came out wild and sweet and right. "Hand me buckets," I said, and they did. The choir kids came in barefoot, pants rolled. Deacons who never lifted anything but platters lifted pews. Pastor pulled books with both hands like a man in a flood, which he was. Renee came in with trash bags and braids damp and flattened to her face, tied at the end in something that looked like she had not planned to be useful, but had chosen to become it. She lifted like any other woman. She did not put on mascara for this. We mopped. We sang while we mopped. Not the songs we had planned for Sunday, work songs, old pieces nobody puts on programs because they don't modulate neatly. We sang, "I know the Lord will make a way somehow," and "These Hands," and every round goes higher and higher until the rain remembered to leave us alone. When the last bucket emptied, we stood looking at one another like a team that won something you can't engrave on a trophy. In the weeks after, congregants became neighbors again. Money came, but not the kind that buys lights for trusses. Money that came in bills folded 4 ways from pockets where it sat next to lint and a peppermint. Men who hadn't been to church showed up on Thursdays because their women told him music's happening, and men who pretend they're suspicious of music are lying about the way a true chord feels in their bones. They sat with their backs against the fellowship hall walls and nodded in time like kings on their days off. Then came the afternoon my son stood in my doorway with a loaf of bread and a letter. He wore the shame that suits men who knew better and didn't do better, but learned something anyway. Glory wagged like she'd been waiting for him since she learned his scent from my clothes. He said, "Do you have a minute?" I said, "I have 60. I'll decide how many you get once you start talking."
He smiled, the smile I remember, the one that curls one corner before the rest of his face catches up. He came inside. He stood like he didn't know whether to sit. I pointed at the chair across from me. He sat. He put the bread on the table like men put bread in movies when they don't know how to say, "I was wrong."
"Mama," he said, "there are things I said to myself that made it easy to say nothing to you. I told myself you'd be fine. I told myself you wanted quiet. I told myself change is holy. I told myself not to make waves because a man needs to hold his job steady for his family. None of those were lies, exactly, but together they became one." "I know," I said. "Excuses become a rope if you braid 'em." He laughed through his nose the way Leon used to, when a truth came too pretty not to laugh at a little. "Renee is in counseling," he said. "I'm going too. We're learning about what platform did to her head and what pride did to mine. I'm not promising miracles. I'm promising habits." "I am not a judge," I said, "despite what my new dog thinks." "Glory's the bailiff," he said. And Glory thumped her tail like a gavel. We both laughed until the sound surprised us. Then we sat for a second in the new kind of quiet that follows laughter when two people find each other around a corner. "We want to make it right," he said. "You can't," I said gently. "You can make it better. You can make it honest. Right is for math. This is for living." He nodded. He pushed the letter across the table. "It's a copy of your deed release agreement with the Ellis Fund. The bank signed off. The refinance went through. First check cleared. We will never tie anyone's roof to anyone's obedience again." "I never did," I said. He looked at my walls. He looked at the shelf Terrence had hung. "I like your house," he said. "My house likes you today. That's new." He asked if he could come to the next Thursday music night. I told him everybody's welcome as long as they passed the test. "What test?" he asked, alarmed. "The test where you keep time," I said. "Fail that and we put you on salad duty." He passed. He walked into that room not as a son of anyone or as a man with a spreadsheet, but as somebody with a voice that had waited behind his bottom teeth since he was 11. He sang harmony like water looks when a boat slides through it and leaves a small wave that makes other things ripple without drowning them. When he finished, I didn't praise him as my boy. I nodded as a woman who directs choirs without a title and said, "You listened." By late summer, my walls wore the color of health, and the alley had 3 more murals. On one, a pair of hands passing a bowl to another pair, and the bowl held light. On another, a woman with her eyes closed, a note drifting from her mouth drawn like a ribbon that curls and loops and ties around the word home. On the third, a line of people viewed from the waist down, different shoes, one barefoot, all standing for something you can feel but not see. People took pictures in front of them. It got back to me that a council member said he wanted to meet the artist. I decided he could come to the Thursday night music and introduce himself like everybody else. If he wanted to shake a hand, he could wait until it wasn't stirring soup. Calvin and I fell into an easy companionship that did not need announcement. He learned how I liked my coffee and showed up with a thermos the first cold morning that didn't announce itself by wind, but by air that pinched you like a neighbor aunt who never learned boundaries. We walked Glory in the evenings and watched the light turn the rail yard into a painting if you squinted at the right part. He did not push. He did not stand back so far I had to reach. He stayed where men stay when they know a woman has learned to enjoy her own company. One day, I pulled up a loose board on the back steps and found a small tin with a note in Aunt Bertie's handwriting. I opened it and found 4 rings like tiny suns and a $10 bill that had waited so long its face had gone soft and green. Her note said, "For your beginnings, years from now." I cried then. Not for the rings, for the way women who come before you make space for the girl you will be later if you are lucky enough to live. The apology Pastor had promised came with actions, not just Sunday sentences. The board opened the books. People understood what numbers meant for the first time in a long time. We set a practice of writing announcements with fewer adjectives. We got good at the word enough. The parsonage got new residents, a young family who took over the women's shelter program and kept their shoes by the door and waved at me each morning when I walked Glory past with a mug in my hand. I didn't feel any itch to move back because I no longer wanted to live in a house whose walls were asked to hold the weight of decisions made by people wearing neckties. My house's walls held my laugh and my dog's bark and the scratch of my brush and the quiet of evenings that did not require a meeting. Calvin did hard work. Her videos moved from perfect staging to real talk. She lost followers and found something like honesty.
She stepped back from the front and started showing up in the kitchen on Tuesdays with hair tied up in a scarf and a t-shirt that said love in a font we didn't buy. One Tuesday, a woman bumped it with a pan and said sorry in a voice that carried resentment and a fair memory of hurt. Renee said, "I deserved that and more," then passed the woman a towel and kept washing. That is all I need to say about her for now.
There was no moment where I stood on a stage and forgave everything. I don't care what people like to watch. Life doesn't bend like that for most of us. My forgiveness grew like ivy on a fence, steady and slow and stubborn, crawling over places until one day you look up and green is everywhere. But there are still patches where wood shows, and I don't force anything. I walk past the church with my chin up. I walk in with my shoulder square. I walk out with my hips easy. That is enough. The dedication service for the fellowship hall's new kitchen came on a Sunday when the air was crisp and the sky looked newly shined like glass rinsed and set out to dry. Pastor asked me to sit in the front row. I sat in the third. He frowned at me and then smiled because perhaps he learned something after all. The ribbon on the kitchen door was pink because somebody didn't check the order box and nobody had the heart to be mad about it. We cut it. Children cheered like children cheer when any ribbon falls to the floor. Pastor handed me the microphone. I did not want it. I took it anyway because sometimes your voice is a broom. I'm not here to preach, I said, because my sermons begin with a pot and end with a song. I'm here to say thank you to those who fed me while I learned to be hungry in a clean way. I'm here to say that the Lord didn't move me out of a house so I could be homeless. He moved me out of a house so I remember how much home I carry with me. I'm proud of us, not because we got a grant or passed an inspection, but because we learned how to make an apology heavy enough to hold a man's plate while he eats from it. If you came for perfect, you came to the wrong address. If you came for enough, stay. They stood. I did not make them. They did it themselves. After, the choir asked me to lead one. I said no and no again. Then a little girl with hair and 100 beads tugged my sleeve and said, "Please sing the one makes me cry." I asked which one. She hummed something that could have been anything and everything, so I sang, "Great is thy faithfulness," because the vile and faithful sits in the mouth the way a peach tastes on a porch, and their grandmothers would approve. On the second verse, Isaiah slipped to my side and found the third above me without stepping on me. Renee's voice came from somewhere behind and did not try to touch a camera. Glory howled once in the parking lot like a wolf that forgot she was domesticated and then lay down and slept. Months later, the council member did find me at a music night. He stood in line like everyone else with a paper plate and sauce on his thumb and said, "That mural turned the corner bright." I told him the corner was bright already. The paint just told the truth out loud. He asked if I'd consider painting a wall near the school. I said yes, because I am now a woman who says yes to what makes children look taller. He tried to shake my hand like it would bring him votes. I gave him the Ellis Fund brochure instead. In the photo, Leon and I are young and in love with our idea of someday. It made the councilman blink. I walked home many nights through a neighborhood that was still itself and not a brochure. Men argued. Women laughed from stoops. A boy practiced a trumpet on a second-floor balcony, bad and brave. Glory sniffed everything worth knowing. At my gate, I would look back at the world and say a little prayer, not to be used in a video, not to be quoted on a page, a kitchen prayer. Thank you for the stove. Thank you for the dog. Thank you for the people who could not find the beat until the beat forgives them. Thank you for the paper that became a wall I leaned on until my back remembered it was built for standing. Sometimes I still dream I live in the parsonage. In those dreams, I open a closet and it's full of coats that don't fit anyone and the smell of cedar blocks. I wake and reach for the wall and feel paint and plaster that my hands put there. I rise and stand on steps that don't creak because Terrence learned angles are just promises a carpenter keeps. I pour coffee. I watch the sun slip through the slats of my blinds and paint a hymn on my floor. Glory stretches and makes that sound dogs make when the day finally knocks on their bones. On a Wednesday in late fall, I found a letter in my mailbox in Renee's hand. It wasn't thick. It didn't bleed perfume. It said, "I'm thankful you didn't destroy me when you could have. I want to be the kind of woman who doesn't need saving because she didn't get lost, but this year I was lost. You didn't throw me a rope so I could strangle myself with gratitude. You built a bridge and told me to walk over it without shoes so I feel every plank. I am feeling them. I won't ask you for absolution. I'll bring rolls on Tuesdays and wash pans until old dishwater make my hands soft as babies. If that's the only ministry I ever get, it's more than I deserve. I put the letter with Aunt Bertie's 10. I believe in keeping certain words near rings. Calvin took me to the water one Saturday. We sat on a bench and watched boats remember they are small. He did not tell me I was strong. He knew I didn't need that from him. He asked me what color I'd use next time I wanted to make a wall feel like morning. I told him probably a blue with a little green in it, the color of holding your breath before good news. He nodded and didn't say anything, because a man who understands color understands silence.
If you walked by my house today, you'd see the lemon tree on the porch thriving like it knows it survived someone else's decision. You'd see a wind chime made of spoons Calvin drilled holes into because the sound is richer when carried by metal that fed a family. You'd see Gloria sleep with her mouth open, dreaming of some rabbit she will never catch, not because she can't, but because I call her back every time and she comes and she's proud of that. The church is not perfect. It is less shiny. We can afford that. People still say the wrong thing and then try to fix it with the right pastry. We accept both. On Tuesdays, when the line is long and the pots are low and somebody says something sharp because they got cut once and never healed, somebody else steps close and says, "You want extra sauce?" And just like that, the wound remembers it can shut for a while. Now and then the bank sends a letter addressed to the Ellis Fund, and I tuck it into a file where words are quiet and wait their turn. 5 years is a short time and a long road. We're walking it. I carry no keys to the parsonage, no title to a role. I keep a brush clean and a pot seasoned. On Thursdays, when a child raises a trembling hand and asks, "Can I go next?" I say, "Of course," because of course is the gospel we forget to preach. I was evicted from church property by people who thought righteousness was a brand strategy. Months later, those same people needed me to save the roof above their heads. I did not do it for them. I did it for the God who listens to songs in kitchens and for the boy practicing trumpet and for the old woman who can no longer stand up for the last verse but hums it anyway because her body knows even if her mind is tired. I did it because Leon put a paper under a bed and Aunt Bertie hid rings under a step, and all the women before me taught me the difference between revenge and repair. One burns for a minute and makes the room smell ugly. The other takes as long as it takes and makes the room livable. If you ask whether I forgave Renee, I will tell you I don't keep ledgers on souls. Some days the balance shows mercy. Other days it shows caution. Both are honest. If you ask whether I love my son, I will point to the third harmony in my favorite hymn where he finds me without looking. If you ask whether I miss the parsonage, I'll say I miss the camellias in winter. Then I'll show you the roses Calvin coaxed along my fence and tell you they smell like a promise a woman made to herself, finally kept. A neighbor asked me last week if I'd ever direct the choir again. I said I do every day. I direct it when a spoon taps a pot in time with my foot and somebody laughs and that laugh carries across the room and returns as a note. I direct it when Tayi strolls past my gate taller than last summer and says he got into the arts program, and I tell him to bring me his class schedule so I can put it on my fridge like a trophy. I direct it when I pick up my brush and draw 2 cups of steam on a wall that had forgotten it could be warm. I am Margaret Ellis. I am 67 years old. My faith is not a screen, it is a stove. My sanctuary is not a stage, it is a table. My choir is anyone who opens their mouth and lets out truth. My home is mine, and my voice is mine, and to anyone who tries to tell me there is a season for my usefulness, I offer a plate and a seat and a song they forgot they knew, and I tell them, kindly but clearly, to hush until the food is served. Then we can talk. Then we can sing. Then we can be a church again, not because we raise money, but because we learned how to share breath. On the nights when the train horns carry like a low moan and the moon sits careless and full above the rail yard, I stand on my step with Glory at my feet. I look at the church roof and at the mural in the alley and at the lemon tree that never asked anybody's permission to bloom, and I say, "Thank you," out loud, to no one in particular. It drifts up and catches somewhere. Maybe it catches on the edge of a cloud. Maybe it catches on Leon's old tie pen. Maybe it catches on nothing but air. It doesn't matter.
It left my mouth. The world heard. That's enough.